What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to another Mets Hot Stove right here on the channel and on X, on both channels and on X, as we are back together right before the new year to talk about all the moves the Mets have been making, or the lack thereof, this offseason. And we do have a lot to talk about. There has been reports, rumors, and all that fun stuff. But before we get started, hit on that like button, guys. Subscribe to the channels. Chris, how you been, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's been a little bit since we have been able to be up on the same screen talking about our New York Mets. And, there are a lot of reports and rumors like you just mentioned, but it's kind of a waiting period right now. It's kind of a quiet period. And I think that things are really going to start to take off, on the trade and free agency market moving forward after the new year. And it is almost a new year as well. So hopefully everyone is enjoying their time as we approach 2026 and we try to figure out what is this roster going to look like heading into this coming season? Because objectively, there are still a lot more holes left to fill on this roster. From the outfield perspective, who's playing left field if it's not Carson Bench? From the bullpen, who is coming in before names like Rayleigh, Devin Williams, Luke Weaver, etc. And also we have to talk about the starting pitching unit as well. Are the New York Mets really going to go into this coming season relying on the rookies to kind of headline the rotation alongside those names that we saw falter in 2025? I would sure hope not, but let's get into it. A lot to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. And you just put it into perspective, right? What are they going to do? They're going to start. Are they going to play with? They're going to play around with the young kids. Are they going to get proven talent? We've heard conflicting reports, not just from David Stearns, but reports in general from writers. We don't know the plan, or the plan doesn't seem like it's being implemented. Because if you're trying to play the kids, you don't sign Jorge Polanco. You don't trade for Marcus Semien. Right? You have an abundance of infield prospects that we had a problem playing last year, and that was with second base and third base in question. And we still couldn't play all of these prospects. So that's what I'm going to ask you before we even get into all the news and rumors. What is the plan? Because I've been trying to figure this out for a while. Beginning of the offseason, Chris, David Stearns specifically said on the first Mets Hot Stove that they're going to be in on the big free agent the big outfield market and the big pitching market, either free agency or trade market. And then when Alonso went away, when Diaz went away, David Stearns went on Hot Stove once again and says, oh, it gives opportunity for the kids to play. But you don't trade for Marcus Semien and you don't sign Jorge Polanco, guys who are over 30 years old, blocking guys that could potentially be on this roster that could be a top prospect. So I'm going to ask you, what is the plan?
I wish I knew myself, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I also know all the answers myself and what's going through the mind of David Stearns. I think the first thing that we have to get out of the way that is still a factual statement is that there are still a lot of options left, both on the trade and the free agent market. A lot of names have come off the board that the Mets may have been interested in, both via trade and free agency, right? Kyle Schwarber's off the board. Pete Alonso, we know that he went to Baltimore. Wilson Contreras, who the Mets were reportedly very interested in bringing on via trade, went to the Boston Red Sox. But still, we also still have names like Bellinger and Framber Valdez. I know that this is a long shot for third base because we have Brett Beatty, but Alex Bregman is still out there, shockingly enough. And the list goes on and on and on. Okamoto. And so, we're approaching this period where, like I said, it's quiet, but in the next month or so, because we're going to have pitchers and catchers reporting, early to mid-February. In the next month, there are going to be a flurry of moves around the league. And the first move probably is going to be given that his deadline to sign with the team is upcoming on January 2nd. So that market is hopefully moving quick, although for Imai's sake, and according to Imai, maybe not as quick as he had originally thought. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But you know what? I was kind of listening in, briefly to your stream last night. And I also made a video about this very topic that we're talking about right now on my channel today, where I break it down a little bit further, where this is the bottom line question that we have to ask ourselves, and Mets fans should be asking this front office. Is this a rebuild or is this not a
Yeah.
rebuild? And the answer to this is going to come with what the Mets do in the next month. Are they going to be in the upper echelon of moves in the free agent market and trade market, or are they going to be in the lower echelon with a name like Austin Hayes, right? As opposed to Cody Bellinger. That is the biggest difference in the example that I can give you right there. And it really depends on the degree of moves that happen because, when we're assessing this roster on paper and where it's at right now versus last season, yeah, maybe the core did need to get shaken up. And that's exactly what David Stearns did. But on paper, how much better is this team right now than it was going into last season, especially in areas of where they faltered? Probably, if you want to give the benefit of the doubt to Stearns, you would say maybe a little bit better. If you don't want to give him the benefit of the doubt, probably a little bit worse. If you want to be a very reasonable Mets fan, like I think you and I both are, we can probably say they're on the same level playing field. You've gotten worse in some areas, you've gotten better in some areas, and it really depends on how these guys bounce back in 2026. Still a lot of question marks left, though, Rob, and that is the biggest thing. So when people talk about rebuilding, there's different, methods to rebuild, especially when you are in the New York market and fans are trying to really see winning baseball while still trying to rebuild. You have a competitive rebuild, you have a developmental rebuild. And what you were talking about before going out there and getting a name like Polanco and Simeon is a developmental rebuild because if we are rebuilding this team, why go out there and get those names when you have Jet Williams coming up, when you have Jacob Reimer coming up? It makes no sense. Leave those positions open for the prospects to come up. Whereas you're talking about a competitive rebuild, okay, we're going to compete or try to compete, maybe not to the best of our ability because we are not shopping at the upper echelon of the free agent market, but we're still going to bring in veterans and we're also going to mesh in certain areas of this team, those prospects. Now, I'm not saying that that's what the Mets are doing, because like I just mentioned at the top of this, there's still a lot of time left, Rob. There's still a lot of time left to get this team to where it needs to be at. But we are going to know whether this team is truly rebuilding in 2026 or they're going for it all, depending on the degree of moves that they make moving forward. Are they going to outbid a team like the Phillies for Tatsuya Imai? A team that's going for it in 2026 will do that. A team that is not probably will be a little bit hesitant and will let him go to a division rival, which would be an absolute mistake in my humble opinion. I still think the Mets have what it takes, and I think David Stearns, if he was truthful in what he was saying months ago, that they are going to put out the best roster that they possibly can, even given the shakeups that we've seen, I think they'll get it done. But if you are relying on all three of McClain, Tong, and Sproat to headline your rotation, or at least be very key supplemental pieces, and also relying on guys like Jet Williams, Ryan Clifford, and Carson Bench coming up. Carson Bench may be the exception because I think it's a time for him to come up and show what he's got. And also talking about Mark Vientos, right? Like, that's not a win now piece. Right? These are not win now pieces. These are question marks trying to develop a team from the ground up and the youth, which is fine. And I have no problem if they go down that route. But as you were mentioning, let's not blow smoke up the fans' asses and say we're going to go out there and give it our best shot to compete with teams like the Phillies and the Dodgers, et cetera, whoever's running the National League, and then also rely on 5, 6, 7 different prospects on your team at a given time. I understand that prospects are needed.
Sure.
Like the Dodgers wouldn't be where they're at right now if they didn't rely on prospects. But I just find it hard to imagine on a team in 2026 relying on 7 or 8 different prospects to come up and produce right away and not even knowing what you're going to get in 2026 from Brett Beatty, who had a resurgent season, but can we see it again? Is Mark Vientos going to bounce back? So on and so forth. That is something that I find hard to believe. So like I mentioned, I don't know the plan, Rob, but I will say we will know in the coming month, depending on which names are on the Mets versus which names they let pass by. And that's going to be very evident whether David Stearns wants to come out in an interview or a press conference and say it directly or not. I have maybe helpless optimism that he will make the right decision in trying to get the right pieces in the Bellingers and Tatsuya Imais of the world. But if he doesn't, then I think it's only right for us fans to question what the actual plan is for 2026 and if they're actually going for it in 2026 and 2027, etc.
Yeah, I think the lack of transparency, I think, is the biggest issue, right? His actions are speaking louder than his words. And that usually sounds like a good motto, but Devin Williams is a downgrade from Edwin Diaz. Luke Weaver is probably better than what the Mets had for the most part in the back end of their bullpen, but they both had down seasons. So we can't be better in that department at the moment. Now, can Devin Williams turn back the clock 2 years ago and be a great closer? Sure. Can Luke Weaver look like he was 2 years ago with the Yankees? Sure. But look, you don't obliterate the core and tell me you're going to be competitive by not replacing players to set up a new core with Juan Soto and Lindor at the forefront. That's fine. I said it for years. This core was rotten. There was something wrong with this core from the get-go. Once Jeff McNeil and Brandon Nimmo completely changed as a hitter, I think it completely messed up the lineup construction between the four guys that we've consistently saw in this lineup in Nimmo, McNeil, Lindor, and Alonso. I thought it was a problem. Nimmo and McNeil were supposed to be that 1-2 with Lindor being that 3, with Lindor and Alonso being that 3-4, whatever combination you want. And it completely messed up the lineup. And we really never had a leadoff hitter until Lindor figured it out in 2024. The number 2 spot was a black hole. We didn't know where to put Nimmo. He was clean up one day, 5th the next day, 3rd, 6th. Like, we didn't know where to put him. We knew Pete Alonso had to be somewhere in the middle of this lineup. It just seemed out of place, and roster construction was just terrible. So I'd rather get the transparency. I'm not saying to come on and say, oh, we're completely rebuilding. I mean, I know people, because it's a big market in New York, people will get upset about that. But I'd rather you just tell us instead of blowing smoke on their asses, like you said. And here's the other thing. Why are you talking to Framber Valdez a few days ago prior to Christmas if you're trying to use these young players? Framber Valdez is going to take a spot of one of these young kids. Because unless you trade a Peterson or you trade a Cody Senga, these guys are going to be on, or a Shomania for that matter, these guys are going to be in the rotation. That's the problem. Like, maybe you can put 1 or 2 of them in the bullpen, but who do you trust in the bullpen? Peterson, he did it in 2024, but we have no idea if he can do it then. We know Cody Senga can't do it out of the bullpen. You ain't moving Clay Holmes to the bullpen. Maybe Sean Manaea can go to the bullpen, but I really doubt they've given him $25 million to pitch out of the bullpen. So that's the problem that I have. It doesn't make sense. If you're going to, obviously McLean's in a rotation. If you're going to use Brandon Sproat and Jonah Tong as part of this rotation, somebody has to get moved. Don't speak to Framber Valdez and give false hope to your fan base. You can talk to Imai. He's younger, so I get that. That makes sense. But it doesn't seem like the Mets are aggressive enough, like the goddamn White Sox that have been reported as one of the favorites. Because all of a sudden the Pirates want to spend money and the White Sox want to spend money. So, most of these Japanese guys are probably going to go to the places that we never even thought of. So I just don't understand the plan in general because, we know it seems like Cody Bellinger is between the Mets and the Yankees. It seems like there's no other team that Bellinger probably is going to be interested in unless they blow him out of the water. So it's either going to be the Mets and the Yankees. Then recently, when John Heyman, I don't know if everybody saw, he was on Bleacher Report Walk-Off and talked about all the possibilities for the Mets. He even brought up Kyle Tucker being a possibility if the price and the years go down. So what are we doing here? That's what I don't understand. Like, if you're serious about the prospects, then be serious about the prospects. That whole being competitive with using a ton of prospects and trickle in the Jorge Polancos and the Simeons of the world, it might work out to be great. But nobody should be excited about the season and the competitiveness until we actually see these guys play. And they might surprise us. We might have great players, but we don't know that. That's a ton of question marks going into the season. And look, I'm okay with that, but it has to be a little bit more transparent in what you're doing here. And again, the reports can be wrong because usually when the Mets make a move, we didn't hear about this move, right? We haven't heard anything about Okamoto being connected to the Mets. He might be a Met because we haven't heard anything about it. So I really don't know. It's frustrating because I didn't think David Stearns had the balls to obliterate the core in one swoop in an offseason. He did it. And again, I was never against breaking up the core. I didn't think he was going to do it in all one off season, but it was a perfect storm, right? Diaz was a free agent. Alonso was a free agent. McNeil seemed like he was just bound to be getting traded. So you had three guys basically could easily be on their way out. Brandon Nimmo was the kind of the long shot, but he accepted a trade offer. He accepted it, and it ended up being a perfect storm for David Stearns to get rid of the whole core. I'm okay with that. If you want to have the core starting with Lindor and Soto, I'm 100% on board with that. I'm okay with that. You want to represent, you want to put your team, this core as your team. That's fine. You're running the team, but don't replace don't get rid of a core. Now again, it's a losing core. They did not win, so I'm not mad that they broke up the core. They've won nothing for us. This wasn't a team that won a couple of years ago and won a championship, and now you want to break it up. That it's not the case. We failed more times than we succeeded, so I'm okay with that. But if you're going to go the Bellinger Tucker, the Bellinger Scooble route, or the Valdez Tucker route, or whatever combination you want to do to make this team really competitive, because that will show us, hey, you bring in an ace, you bring in a top outfielder. Now we're having a conversation of this team can be really competitive. They can be contenders, because everybody thinks that, oh, we got to replace 38 home runs with Pete Alonso or 25 from Brandon Nimmo. It's not just about replacing, because we had a ton of home runs. We had a ton of RBIs from our top four. 5-9 was a disaster. So if you can get me guys that can hit 20 to 25 home runs and it spreads out the lineup from 1 through 7, then we can have a conversation, because you know what? That's more production throughout the lineup, because 1 through 4 of all those home runs and all those RBIs from the top 4 guys in the lineup, and we know what we're talking about, it led us to 83 wins. And yes, they weren't all of the problem. It was mostly the pitching, but there was times in the first month or two of the season where the offense couldn't even get a run across. So if they would have scored a couple more runs and won a couple of those games, maybe we wouldn't have to worry about the Reds and that third wild card at the end of the season. Maybe we would have had 85, 86 wins and we'd have been comfortably in the playoffs. But there's the other problem, Chris. I don't want to strive for the third wild card. You know how David Stearns always says sustained success? And I talked about this yesterday on my show. That's a broad statement. What is sustained success? Being a 500 team? Fighting for that third wild card with 85 wins? Or is it winning divisions? Making the playoffs every year and being a real contender in the playoffs? Because look at the teams that continue to make the playoffs but never win the World Series. At some point, it's going to get stale. Now, we're not used to making the playoffs every year. We would enjoy it. But you know what? If you make the playoffs 5 years in a row, Chris, and you lose every time, no matter if it's the NLCS, DS, wild card, even if you get to the World Series and lose, you didn't win. At some point, Chris, it's going to get stale. And we're going to say, what could we do to get over the top? I mean, we're with a team, a crosstown rival in the Yankees, that the fans talk about exactly that. They make the playoffs every year, and they couldn't be any unhappier than they already are. So we would be the same way, and everybody got to understand we would be that way too if we continue to make the playoffs and don't win a championship.
But we need to get there first, though, because we haven't
Sure.
continuously made the playoffs. So that's what I think is, is probably going through the mind of David Stearns when he makes these types of moves. And it just seems like, and I know you said this time and time again, it just seems like he is very hesitant to go ahead and dismantle this best farm system that is ranked #1 in baseball, to try to make a run. And I don't know how much it has to do also with looking at who you're competing with. Does it make sense to put the best team possible and gut the farm when you know the Dodgers are as good as they are? I know that's kind of a loser mentality, but I'm sure teams think about that as well. And it's unfortunate because the Dodgers are like the golden standard right now of what everyone wants to get to. But I also correlate this to looking at the rest of the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
How strong of off seasons have teams around the league really had so far?
Sure.
Dodgers, you know what I mean? Like let's look at multiple teams. If you brought up the Yankees, right? Like, what have the Yankees really done this offseason so far? I'm not saying just to compare the Mets to the Yankees, but since we were on the discussion, the Phillies,
compare the Phillies and the Braves for that,
right? So,
you know.
right, let's compare that. I mean, the Braves and the Phillies, with what the Mets have done so far this offseason, like, who are the Phillies' notable additions so far? Adolis Garcia. I know I'm probably missing one because I don't really keep up with the Phillies, but it's not like their team is astronomically better. They retained Kyle Schwarber, okay? That's not really adding on. They still have a Nick Castellanos problem. So these other teams are also being patient. It's not really only the New York Mets. And the reason why you're seeing a team like the White Sox swoop in for a guy like Munetaka Murakami, and now they are also considered to be in play for Tatsuya Imai, according to Yahoo Sports most recently, is that these bigger market teams, not just the Mets, but all these other bigger market teams, don't want to give these guys the years. We saw Murakami only end up with 2 years. Now, if you're going to do that from the perspective of never playing in the MLB before and trying to showcase yourself for your next contract, you're going to want to go to the least pressurized situation. And that's what Murakami did. And I would not be shocked if Okamoto does the same thing, and maybe even Tatsuya Imai. The market for these guys is not like the market has been for all these other Japanese guys that have come through the wings before, in Yamamoto, Sasaki, etc. It's just not the same. And so, yeah, man, I agree with you. If the Mets ever do get to a point, because we're not there yet, if they ever do get to the point where they consistently make the playoffs and lose, just like the Dodgers did before they built up this dynasty that they have going on right now, you talked about it before they finally broke through, outside of that COVID year championship, whatever, then it would get a little bit boring. Then you need to go and make the next step up. But maybe sustained success isn't really the worst thing here when you're talking about the gravity of the situation. I know Mets fans are impatient. I get it. I'm impatient too. I'm sitting here telling you all, and so is Rob, the Mets, if they are really going to compete, they need to go ahead and spend. They need to go ahead and not be afraid of trading the prospects. How much has Steve Cohen spent since he's bought the Mets, and what has he gotten in return?
Sure.
Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. So it's a fine balance. And I think that David Stearns is trying to find that balance. And he's being a little bit more on the conservative end of that and trying to figure out that balance from the start. And maybe as his tenure goes on, and by the way, this is something that we also need to make note of. Whether you like David Stearns or not, he's going to be here for a very long time. A president of baseball operations that is feeling heat, right, in his job status, would not do what he just did. He would not take that gamble of gutting this entire team. David Stearns knows that this is going to be his job for the foreseeable future. And Steve Cohen is sold on that. And so I just wanted to throw that in there too, because I don't think a lot of Mets fans realize that this guy isn't going anywhere, whether you like him or not. And like I said, do I think he's done has he done a perfect job so far? Absolutely not. But I think that when you inherit the situation of what he inherited, it's a process. And the Mets, when they overachieved expectations in 2024, set him back a little bit because he was forced to make some decisions that he probably didn't want to make and he probably wasn't attempting to make when he first got on board. So it's tough, man. It's really tough right now for a lot of New York teams, unless you're a fan of the New York Knicks, right? The Jets are abysmal. The Giants are abysmal. Don't even get me started on the Giants. You see my little Giants little plaque right here. The Yankees, if you want to talk about the Yankees, what do they have to show for it? Mets scraps, right? Ahmed Rosario, Paul Blackburn. They just signed the Mexican League MVP. It's not only the New York Mets that are quiet right now. And let's be honest, the Mets really haven't been quiet this offseason. It's been, they've made moves. It's just that retaining the guys that they wanted to retain in Diaz and Alonso didn't happen. And that's why Mets fans are pissed off right now.
Yeah.
But you know what? Like I said, we're going to know everything that we need to know, regardless of David Stearns coming on, in a press conference and playing these word games, right? And skirting around the point. we're going to know what he's really intending for this team in 2026
Yeah.
by whether or not he's going to go out there and go all out for another trade, right? And you made a really good point too that I want to end my spiel on here. Lengthening the lineup is a real strategy for the Mets in 2026 because, like you said, going into 2025, we knew it was top heavy. You got great production from your top 3 or 4. Fantastic. And then the lineup got to 5, 6, 7. You know, Beatty was carrying that bottom half for a while, but Tyrone Taylor for most of the year was a negative on offense. Same thing with Mark Vientos. Francisco Alvarez, same thing.
Yeah.
And so that's a real strategy. That's why I like a signing like Polanco, even if it's only for 2 years.
Yep.
You know, if and I just saw, I was scrolling up, if the Mets go out there and trade for a name like Brendan Donovan, who can play outfield and infield, I would love a guy like Brendan Donovan. He's not going to wow you with some of the numbers that he posts, like, you know, the OPS, but he is a winning player, I think. He's a guy that, you know, a winning team could really use. He's a versatile player, and he's a better version of Jeff McNeil. Let's be honest. That's what Brendan Donovan is. And so all the Jeff McNeil super fans ought to be ecstatic if the Mets brought in a guy like Brendan Donovan. So I really do think that lengthening this lineup is also a very good strategy if that's what David Stearns is going for. Maybe not so much of the flashy names, and maybe you rely on Carson Bench to come in and produce a little bit. That's fine. But give us solid, gritty, winning players. They don't have to be flashy. Just build a competent lineup. That's all we're asking for. But relying on Jet Williams, Carson Bench, you know, Ryan Clifford to come up here and make immediate contributions, all 3 of them, is a really questionable play. And that screams developmental year, in my opinion.
Yeah, like I said, you know, you can have a stretched out lineup and a little bit more length in the lineup. That would be fine, right? You know, I mean, look at the lack of production when it came to home runs and RBIs from 6 to 9. It was 5 to 9 at times. You know, nobody had over 20 home runs. The RBIs were nowhere to be found. So, you know, if you get a couple of guys in there that, let's say Alvarez figures out what he needs to do and Vientos has a rebound and Beatty continues to get better, you know, those are 20 home run guys right there. You know, that leads to more production in the lineup. And again, you know, the offseason is not over yet. It's a lot to talk about. But as of right now, I think a lot of us believe it could be if you want to call it a retool, I don't call it a retool. It should be a rebuild if you can use all those prospects. But we'll definitely see what is going to go on for the long haul of this, the rest of this offseason, which I wish it was over already so I could talk about some games. Vinny, thank you for the super sticker. I appreciate that. Keep on coming back to the channel for more. And you know what? Let's get into the information that we're hearing. And the most recent person that we have to talk about is Tatsuya Imai, who is going to be his last day to sign with the team is on Friday, January 2nd. And that is something where from day one, we thought that the Mets should be in on, right? It makes a lot of sense. You know, I don't know about if he can pitch every 5th day or 6th day. That's something that just has to be determined when we get to that point, if we sign him. But from day one of the offseason, we heard news of Framber Valdez, which is weird, right? We were all shocked. We're like, really? That's somebody that's well over 30 or over 30 years old, you know, got a few pounds to him. It was weird. And the Mets still seem to be connected. But when it comes to Imai, isn't he the perfect fit for a David Stearns type of player, right? Under 30 years old, got a pretty damn good arm. You know, they're more comparing him to like a little bit better of a Kodai Senga, not really a Yamamoto or even a Sasaki. More of like a Kodai Senga. He throws harder than Senga, but he has that finesse like Senga with his other pitches. I don't see why you wouldn't go get him. But again, if you get Imai, somebody's got to get out of this rotation. Like, you're blocking more people. That's the other thing I don't understand. Kodai Senga should be off this team already, to be quite honest with you. But Yeah, Chris. Yeah.
That's something that's been circulating too, and it's unverified. Like, these are unverified rumors. I think that there's some accounts that are out there over on X and social media that cover these Japanese teams and, cover these players that are coming over from Japan, and, they give out the rumors that they're hearing from their perspective in that league. But there was something that was floating around, and like I said, don't take this as a factual statement, because this is just another rumor at the end of the day. But that if the Mets are serious about Imai, I think we all know that. I think the Mets are one of the 4 or 5 teams that are serious about Imai, alongside the Phillies, and of course we have the White Sox now. But that they could. This report was that they could look to the Mets could look to, instead of trading him, just flat out release him and clear up that roster spot to give to Imai instead, and kind of like a
Do you
swap
think that
situation.
Stearns would do that though? Like blow that money up instead of getting anything in return? He don't seem like the guy to do that.
I don't know. That's why I was like, I don't know if this is too believable or not. I wouldn't put it past him, but I think that he would try to get at least the value back in return. Although we've been talking about an entire offseason of Cody Senga being on the trade block and all these teams wanting to buy low on him, that maybe Stearns is just like, I don't know. Like, why wouldn't you take back, like, international bonus
Sure.
pool money,
Which
something
they
like
need,
that?
by the way. Which they need, by the way, to
Right? Because
sign
they stole the prospect from the
right.
Yankees. Yeah,
Right.
for sure. But yeah, that's why it didn't make too much sense to me. Why would you not just give him up for anything at that point instead of just flat out releasing him? I don't know about all the details of how much they would save on the contract, if anything, but that's what I saw, I came across on social media. But just food for thought there.
Yeah, like I said, I just don't understand the process of what Stearns is trying to do, because excuse me, sorry about that. They've been connected to Framber Valdez from the get-go and still are, and they're kind of in on I'm guessing they're one of the favorites, but again, if he gets more than a 4-year deal, the Mets ain't getting him. That's just a fact. I don't think, I said it yesterday on the Mets Talk Live yesterday. I'm saying it again, and I don't know if you believe me, or agree with me, but at some point, David Stearns needs to make a big move, either a big trade, a blockbuster trade, or a big free agent signing, because he has not done that. I know yesterday I got into an argument with somebody in the comments in regards to Soto and Alonso. We all know what happened there. That was not David Stearns. David Stearns did not want Pete Alonso. That was obvious. Steve Cohen jumped into the mix. Same thing with Juan Soto. David Stearns isn't offering a suite for Juan Soto's family without Steve Cohen's okay. All right, that was Steve Cohen doing that. So I want to see it. That's why I want to see a Freddie Peralta trade, or a Sandy Alcantara, or a Tariq Skubal trade, or that crazy Padre trade that we were talking about a month ago, with like 9 different players from each side. Like it was insane. Like I want to see something crazy like that, because no good trade thinks the other one got over on the other team. And that is where I want to see him do that. You know what? If you sign Cody Bellinger or Kyle Tucker, I can see that you're willing to do 5, 6, 7, 10 years if it's Kyle Tucker. You know what I'm saying? Like, I want to see that. I want to see you be aggressive for Tariq Skubal. There is nothing should stop you from getting Tariq Skubal. Don't tell me that because he's a rental. Because the same people who want to give up 3 prospects for Tariq Skubal, right, that wouldn't give up 3 prospects for Tariq Skubal, would give 2 for Freddie Peralta, who's also a rental. Like, I'd rather get the best player. Go get the best player. Do you really believe Steve Cohen is going to allow Tariq Skubal to leave the New York Mets when he's going to give him every penny possible? That's what I want to see. I want to see it. And again, if you go through the motions, this is what annoys me about David Stearns, is that if you're going to go to the rebuild stage and use the prospects, see what the young pitchers do, and then make a decision on free agency with Tariq Skubal. But again, you're taking a big risk, because if he gets traded and a team comes with a big extension and he takes it, well, guess what? That's one less player that you're able to get to fill a rotation spot. And if you waited this year and these kids don't turn out what we expect them to be, then you're back to square one. And that is where you're when you talked about David Stearns being here a long time, I don't agree with that. I truly don't believe that. He blew up the core. And again, Cohen had to give the okay. So I understand he just didn't do it on his will and, didn't tell Cohen and it just happened. Cohen had to okay all this. But I don't think he has more than 2 years if this doesn't turn around by 2027. So I feel that way. Because you can't blow up a core like that. Fan favorites. And don't think Steve Cohen doesn't care about that, because he does. Clearly, he showed it last year. Everything the fans wanted, they got last year. And to do that this year, and if you have a down season, which is it could be very likely to happen if you're going to go the rebuild route, you better be a big contender in 2027. Now, if there's a season, we can't control that. But let's say there is. You better be competitive. You better be a contender, not just competitive. I don't want to be a 500 team and tell me, oh, everything's okay. Because we're going on to year 40 of not winning the championship. And that's not all David Stearns' fault. I get that. That's partially the Wilpons, or most of the Wilpons. But still, the fact is, we got to find a way to put everything in perspective when it comes to David Stearns. He's consistently half-assed deadlines and off seasons, and is why we're here in the first place. We can go back to a couple of years ago. We all know what they needed in 2024 when they were going on that red-hot streak. We know we needed a couple of bats. He made a couple of good moves, but it ended up being the downfall of the playoff of this team was the starting pitching, because most of the guys didn't pitch that many innings for years, and they broke down in the playoffs when he didn't get starting pitching. Same thing goes for 2025. We know what we needed at the deadline. We talked about bringing up Nolan McLean in July when everybody was getting hurt. That was the time to do it, not mid-August, just to save his rookie status. So I want to see something here. I want to see that he actually has a pulse, because right now he has no pulse. He's not reactive, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but he never goes that extra mile. Like, don't lose Cody Bellinger for an extra year. Don't lose Tariq Skubal to whoever because of one prospect. Same thing goes for Kyle Tucker or Framber Valdez. Like, how many more reports have to come out that the Mets were in on Wilson Contreras, but they didn't do enough? We heard that last year with Garrett Crochet. How did that turn out for the New York Mets? You know what I'm saying? Like, a day late and a dollar short is right now is the title for David Stearns on top of in front of his door. That's what it is right now. He always comes up short, and I want to see him go that extra mile. I'm not saying every single time, but if you want Cody Bellinger, get him. If you want Valdez, you're still talking to the damn guy since day one in the offseason. Get him. Do it. Like, you want Terry Skubal, do it. Stop being afraid to make a move. It just doesn't make sense, Chris. And that's the whole point of annoying me. Same thing goes for Amai. Same thing. You want him, get him.
No, I agree with you. That's the bottom line. And I'll never disagree with that statement, because, like people are saying in the chat here, look at the Red Sox. They had probably one of the top 3 farm systems last year, and they did not even think twice about going out there and getting, a guy like Crochet. Look at what they're doing this year too, right? Multiple moves. I know Sonny Gray's all right, like he's nothing special, but they still went and got him. They still fortified their rotation. Same thing with Wilson Contreras.
Yeah.
And they were in a position where they understood they had a plethora of, guys in the farm system that they can part ways with. I don't think the Mets are quite there yet, but I think that it's approaching time for them to make decisions on these guys. You have to make decisions on these guys, because like you said, and this goes full circle back to the conversation that we had, 20 minutes ago, is that you have roster blockages where you will not be able to make a decision and see this guy play at the major league level because he is getting blocked by someone else. So second base, we can go on, so on and so forth. And so when we're talking about seeing these guys and what they have and making a decision on them at the MLB level, who's to say that they don't flop? Which is also not putting the best product out there that you possibly can. And so Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that David Stearns needs to go out there and make his signature move. And I think that's what you're trying to say. Just a signature move to tell Mets fans that if there's something that is right that presents itself, he will make the move and he won't think twice about it. And we really haven't seen that as of just yet. And so I definitely agree with that point that Rob just brought up. And so, yeah, like I said, I wish I knew what the actual plan was for this team moving forward. I know that they're not going to call it a complete rebuild. I don't think it is a complete rebuild, but relying on these prospects and having the best farm system in baseball is fine, but we need to see that start translating to wins on the field to add on to those 83 wins that we had and missing the playoffs in 2025. Is that going to be the best possible situation to start off the 2026 season and achieving that? The answer is probably not. And if that's the case, then we have to be, I guess, acclimated and very well acquainted with the word patience, because that's what it's going to take over the next couple of seasons as these guys do develop. So, I think that the Red Sox is a very good comparison to see if the Mets go down the route that the Red Sox went down starting last offseason, or if they take a little bit, again, more of a methodical approach than the Red Sox did. And David Stearns, like he needs to make that signature move, like you said. I made videos in the past couple of days about it. I've talked about Tatsuya Mai. If you get Senga off of this roster, I have no problem going full throttle for Mai. Yeah. But I think that swap does need to happen. I think that in this whole offseason, we've been in agreement on Senga that we don't want to see him back. There's nothing to see more of out of Cody Senga. He can go out there and kill it with another team and be an injury ticking time bomb that he has been in his entire Mets career so far. That's fine. I need, and we need as a fan base, reliable, proven guys. And reliability is a huge thing when you're talking about, the playing time of these New York Mets players of the past couple of seasons on all fronts. And so maybe that is why the Mets are going towards this youth movement, right? Maybe that's why, because they think there's, less guys that are injury prone, and, the younger they are, the more they'll hold up in terms of not getting injured and staying on the field. And that's fine. But there has to be a perfect blend that I talked about, right? There has to be a perfect blend of veterans and prospects coming up. And I don't think the Mets have quite achieved that just yet. And it's a very big gamble, Rob. That's what we're talking about. And someone in the comments actually above, said, and I think it's way above, I'm not sure if we're actually going to find it, but, it is fair for us Mets fans to question what the hell is truly going on with this team.
Sure.
Right? We're not just going to sit here and sit back and agree with every single move. Although, like I think the tale of the two stories of the guys on your screen right now between Rob and myself is that I have been willing to see and wait out what David Stearns has been doing and is going to do. And Rob's just like, I need the proven guys right now. I want them right now. And that's fine, because both perspectives are absolutely valid. But both of us are always going to question what the overall plan is here. And objectively, we don't know what the plan is. Yeah. Nobody can really tell you. Not a single beat reporter, not a single other podcaster can confidently tell you this is what the Mets are doing, because we have no idea. Nobody knows besides Steve Cohen, David Stearns, and that front office. Yep. And so, do you trust in them or you don't? That's the bottom line. That's the simple question.
Yeah, honestly, we kind of don't have a choice, right? We have to. It's a wait and see approach at this point, right? We're going to be. Some might be. Look, not everybody's going to be unhappy with the decisions when the roster is set, and not everybody's going to be happy. And I apologize if I'm freezing. I think I'm freezing back and forth here. I think it's on my end. I'm not sure, but I think I'm freezing. And if I apologize, if I sound terrible, I apologize.
I can see. I can hear you. You're clear on my end.
Okay, so I don't know. Maybe it is. I don't know what the hell's going on, but all right, cool. But. Yeah, I know everybody's not going to be happy. Some people are going to be very happy with the decisions. And, the prospect huggers should be in front in line, because the way this offseason is trending at the moment, that's exactly what everybody's been talking about, right? It's not like we've been playing all veterans that have not been homegrown talent. I mean, the core was homegrown. You know what I'm saying? We had Beatty there, we had Vientos, we had Alvarez. These guys were here. They just don't perform. Beatty showed a little bit. Vientos had a terrible season. So it's just a matter of whatever decision David Stearns goes or makes when it comes to a mixture of veterans or prospects, he better be right. But here's the other thing. If you choose Carson Bench, and let's say you do get a Bellinger or you don't get a Bellinger, you have Tyron Taylor playing left field, and you'll have people for the bench. What do you do with Ryan Clifford? That's the other conversation. Where's Jet Williams playing now? He's blocked in every position. Where's he playing? Mauricio, Acuna, where are these guys playing? That is why when I say, I'm not saying to blow up the farm system for massive trades, but sometimes you got to make trades to lessen the burden of the logjam that you currently have in almost every position. Let's be honest. Carson Bench is going to be in the outfield, either in center or left field. That takes up somebody's opportunity. That's also a top prospect. If the Mets have one of the better farm systems in baseball, getting rid of 2 or 3 of them, even 4 of them in your top 25 or top 20 isn't going to hurt this farm system. If they're as good as they're supposed to be, it's not going to hurt. That's why teams like the Red Sox and the Dodgers, well, especially the Dodgers, where they've traded prospects to bring in proven talent. They made decisions on their prospects. What I think Met fans need to be asking, and some are, and me and Chris are, is make decision on these players. That's it. We want to see, right? Acuna shouldn't be a bench player. If you're going to make him a bench player, he's not. I don't consider him a prospect anymore. He's a role player, which is fine. You need those on your team. Vientos shouldn't be sitting for a week. Mauricio last year sat for 2 weeks in September and then needed the pinch hit in a spot that Mendoza needed him to because he had nobody else left on the bench. And he was ice cold. What were you going to get from Mauricio? You know what I'm saying, Chris? And that's the issue. Like, I don't want to have that problem we had last year where you have guys that come up, can't play every day, who are used to playing every day, and they're sitting on the bench. That's why decisions have to be made. You can't hoard these prospects and think, again, this is not Sunday softball league, Chris. We can't play 4 guys in the outfield. We can't play, we can't have 2 catchers. It doesn't work like that. And that's the problem that I think Stearns is dealing with right now. But his job is to make that decision. It's not ours to make those decisions on those prospects.
And I completely agree with you in that sentiment. And that's why when Blast asked me what I foresee for the Mets moving forward, I said, I still think that if the Mets are going to make a big signature David Stearns splash move this offseason, it's going to be via the trade rather than a free agent signing, because you still have that excess. I would hope that David Stearns and this front office realizes what you just said, Rob, because it's very true. I don't need to see Ronnie Mauricio coming off the bench and being a role player.
Yeah.
His ceiling, right, is a lot higher than that. And we've seen glimpses of that, and that injury that he sustained in the Winter League, hindered him for a little bit. And I don't think that he was put in the best situation last season, as some people are pointing out. And I definitely agree with that as well. Let him go to a smaller market team and figure it out there, because I'm sure he will. Get some assets in return. Guys that are not MLB ready like Mauricio is. Yeah. Or at least whatever you want to get for him. But don't have him sit here for the next 3 or 4 years and be a role player while Simeon is taking up the second base spot that he could be playing in to prove that he is, the next best, Mets second baseman. That's really the bottom line. Mark Vientos, right? Same thing. If the Mets are going out there, and if they do somehow, and I saw a clip of Jorge Polanco working on his first baseman fielding and footwork. Listen, that's fine. If the Mets really are going to go down that route, that's fine. If they somehow bring in a first baseman, Vientos needs to be off this team. Like, you know what I mean? Polanco's your DH at that point, and Polanco's still probably going to be DHing at some point this season, whether he's playing first base or not. I think he's going to split time there, and Vientos just doesn't have anywhere to go. So you have to make decisions on Acuna, Mauricio, and Vientos because these guys cannot continue to be these role players for this team moving forward. It's absolutely disheartening, and quite frankly, it's a slap in the face to them because they are better than being role players, I think, at their peak performances. And in the same breath, when you're talking about this from the Mets perspective, you can get valuable things in return for them by just letting them go and flourishing elsewhere if you're not going to set them up to give them that prime opportunity that they need to showcase themselves in Queens. And I agree with that. I 100% agree with that. Right? We've been talking about Luis Angel Acuna in potential, Robert Jr. trades for how long now? Yep. Since last season. Same thing with Vientos and Acuna for Luis Robert Jr. You know what I mean? Like yep. That's what doesn't make sense to me is the logjam that you have of not just prospects, of already MLB ready guys that have graduated from prospect status, like Acuna, like Mauricio, like Vientos. What are you doing with those guys? Yep. What are you doing with them? That's what I want to know.
But hey, run prevention, right? I mean, that Jorge Polanco makes so much sense at that point. I mean, right now there's a ghost playing in left field, so it just it just doesn't make sense. That's the problem. And David Stearns is working like he's still with the Milwaukee Brewers. With hoarding prospects in Milwaukee makes sense because they're not bringing in any proven talent that costs money or costs big trades. It's just not going to happen, and that's the way he's trying to do it. And you might be successful in New York, you might, and we'll see it clearly. It looks like this year you're going to see it, but you got to bite the bullet at some point. And that's the frustrating part when it comes to David Stearns is that are they making that decision? And that's why I want to see a trade. Not even what we get back. Obviously, that's important. But it's just showing that, okay, you made decisions on these guys. All right, Vientos is not a part of our long-term plan. Great. Get rid of him. Do it. That's the problem. And it goes back to the guys we're going to start talking about right now, right? With Cody Bellinger. Kyle Tucker, right? What is your decision on these guys? You're clearly in on Cody Bellinger. You might be, I guess, touching the surface on the Kyle Tucker situation if his market doesn't go as high as everybody thought it would be, which I still don't believe it's happening. But let's say Cody Bellinger is a real possibility, which it seems to be. What does that do to your other guys? If Carson Ben's going to be your center fielder, or your left fielder, whatever, and Cody Bellinger is going to be here, that takes Jet Williams off the board. That takes Ryan Clifford off the board. You see the potential problem with that? And I don't think too many people are only talking about don't blow up the farm system. It's not about blowing up the farm system. You're going to leave these guys in the system and devalue them. That doesn't help your organization, short or long term, by devaluing their potential or their value to other teams. I mean, how long has Brett Beatty? How long did the Marlins want Brett Beatty? I know he looked better this year, and now he's looking like the Mets starting third baseman. But for years, the Marlins tried to get Brett Beatty, and for years, it wasn't just David Stearns, but it was other GMs that said no. And we could have had one of the Marlins pitchers by now. And it's just a matter of making that decision. And Cody Bellinger makes sense if you're trying to contend, really contend. Getting Cody Bellinger and trying to go through a rebuild doesn't make a lot of sense. So why give him 6 years when you can have Jet Williams or Ryan Clifford in left field or center field, wherever you want them? So again, I'm going to ask you, Chris, right? I think you would want Cody Bellinger. We would want Kyle Tucker, but we don't know the plan. And if it's a rebuild, then Cody Bellinger makes no sense. So why are we in on him and being one of the favorites?
Agreed. And that's why if you go get Cody Bellinger, that's fine. That's great. We're going to all be celebrating because the team just was made better by those moves alone. but there's still multiple different holes that I can say this till I'm blue in the face. You can't go out there and get Bellinger and then half-ass everything else and half-ass the rotation, right?
Correct.
You have to plug all of these holes in an efficient manner with talent, maybe not to the level of Cody Bellinger, right? But good talent. You can't just splurge on Cody Bellinger and then half-ass a different part of your team and then expect it all to work out and contend. It has to be an even balance. And that's where I have trouble seeing the Mets doing that in this offseason alone. That's where in the back of my mind, because like you just said, there's no question about it. I think anybody in here, maybe outside of a couple people, would love to see Cody Bellinger on this team, would love to get Tetsuya Imai, would love to make the additional move for Framber Valdez. And I think, by the way, Framber Valdez, I'm not sure if we're going to talk about him or not, but I think that the only way that the Mets go down that route with Valdez is if he's willing to take a 3-year deal. Maybe
I think that might happen though, because I don't think the Mets would be still talking to him if that's not the case right now.
Sure. That's if that happens, I'm fine with it. Maybe it might take $35 million a year just to get him to sign it, but I'm sure the Mets would do it because they love and they prioritize the short-term deals, and the AAV at that point doesn't even matter because they can defer payments, they can do whatever they want, just like the Dodgers do. But that's where I have this hard time understanding the vision of going out there and getting Cody Bellinger, but then having the rotation being what it is right now. If you go out there and get Cody Bellinger and then turn around and make a trade for Freddie Peralta,
now we're talking.
We're talking. But if you go out there and get Cody Bellinger and then don't make that move, let's say you go out there and get a guy like, I don't know, I'm not saying that Nick Pivetta is bad, but I don't think that he's to the level of Freddie Peralta, quite frankly. He had a good season last season with the Padres. I won't diminish that. But, that just wouldn't make too much sense to me. So there's levels to this. There's levels to anything, in any market that you get yourself into on the trade market and the free agent market. And I think that with the Mets and where they're at right now, they need to be in the upper echelon of all of these moves moving forward for each of these position groups. So that's what I think. Bellinger's a unique circumstance too, because we know who represents him. They're going to be asking for the years that the Mets clearly don't want to give. The Yankees don't even want to give him the years.
Correct.
Right? If it's Mets and Yankees, like we all think it is, because the Phillies are out of the running after the Adolis Garcia signing for them. They said they're not going to make an outfield move. Maybe the Blue Jays, if they miss out on Kyle Tucker, swoop in for Bellinger. But I find that hard to believe. I can't see David Stearns abandoning the years plan that he's already set forth with what we've seen so far this offseason. Bellinger's going to get a 4-year deal. Framber might get a 3-year deal. Imai's probably going to get a 4-year deal, I would have to imagine, barring anything unforeseen. And it's kind of that notion that we have right now, and looking at David Stearns, it's like, prove me wrong. Yep. Show us that it's not just about the short term. Because I'm not sure if you all remember on my channel, and if you're new to my channel, then welcome, but I made a video talking about the Mets 2 to 3 year plan under David Stearns. This is what I'm saying about the competitive rebuild. And I hate to go back to this point, but I'm going to do it, right? I don't want this to be the case where the Mets are doing just enough to scrape by and field a competitive team while not actually going all the way in to compete and selling us Mets fans that sustained success. No, what you're doing is you're racking up the most amount of wins that you possibly can while still waiting for these young guys to develop.
Correct.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and meanwhile, thank you for the comment. We need to accept the fact that Stearns isn't going to let go of prospects until July. That is wrong. He's had opportunities to do that. When the Mets were on their hot streak in 2024, he had enough potential prospects to make those trades. He didn't do it. He didn't do enough. 2025, we know what we needed. We needed a top-line starter. They were available if he was willing to make those prospects available. he didn't do it. It ultimately burned us and bit us in the ass at the end. That's the problem. Why do you think that he would not do it during the offseason, but all of a sudden do it in July during the trade deadline? Because here's the problem. If you got question marks going into the season, you're hoping for everything else to go right other than those question marks. So you don't have to worry about that at the deadline. We all know every team is going to need a bullpen arm or two at the deadline. That's a guarantee. That always happens. But if you need a starter, if you need another bat, plus bullpen, it's very hard to get all of those at the deadline. And most likely you're not. So making your roster be somewhat set with less question marks gives you the opportunity to, when the trade deadline comes around in July, I got to get bullpen arms. We all know that. And we might need a bat or a starter. Maybe not a top line starter because you already did that in the offseason. Maybe you need somebody who's an innings eater. It's easier to get than with 2 question marks at the deadline than needing 3 or 4, as we've seen the last couple of seasons where you got some, but you ultimately didn't get enough. He revamped the bullpen. Now, it didn't work out, but the starting pitching destroyed the bullpen, regardless of the situation. We ended up needing probably an outfield bat. We got the worst one possible. That's the problem. He either gets the lesser of the available players or doesn't do anything at all that's needed. And that's the problem. That is why the offseason is where you try to fill as many question marks as possible. I'm not saying to do all. Obviously, we would love that. But fill most of those question marks so you don't have to worry about that. Obviously, injuries take a part of that conversation or that question mark. But let's say people stay healthy. Guess what? You're going to be okay because it's less guys and question marks you need at the deadline.
Right. And this is where I think a lot of people get focused. I'm not talking about this comment, by the way. I'm just talking about in general what I'm seeing in the comments and everything that I see on social media from Mets fans. A lot of people get so concerned about the free agents and you have to get better via free agency. No, you can make trades. And that's what I think the Mets should do because I agree with this. You kill 2 birds with 1 stone, so to speak, at that point. You get better and you make decisions on the blockage of prospects and the multitude of prospects that you have coming up. When we were doing these streams, right, back in 2023, when Epler was selling the farm off, we were all ecstatic. Lost season. Blow it up. Get us to a farm system that is top 5 in baseball. Well, now they're what? Top 3, maybe even number 1. But I said back then, we are all celebrating right now, and that's fine. But there is going to become a point when Epler or whoever starts to overtake this team, because we didn't know it was going to be David Stearns back then. So we're talking about 2.5 years ago, right? There's going to be a point where the Mets need to make a decision on all these influx of names that are coming into this organization and are getting drafted by the Mets, right? You know, they made a decision on one of those names being Drew Gilbert. They let him go in the Tyler Rogers trade. That's what we want to see, right?
Yep.
Right? And it didn't work out in the end. Tyler Rogers was a really good name to get at the deadline, but David Stearns made a decision on Drew Gilbert, and he said, you know what? We've got outfielders coming up. We've got Carson Bench. We've got Jet Williams. We've got Morabito. We've got all these outfielders coming up. We can afford to throw in Drew Gilbert into this deal, right? We need more of that.
Yep.
We need more of those decisions on these prospects. And that's what I'm trying to get at, is that Steve Cohen can spend $2 billion collectively, maybe even $3 billion on free agents. And this team can still not perform up to the expectations because we've already seen the first virtually billion that he spent hasn't worked out. So it's not about reckless spending. That's not going to make this team better. You spend and you make the decision to go for it on the right players that you are evaluating on the talent basis, but you make the necessary trades when the proper talent becomes available.
Yep.
And I think that there's a lot of names, whether we know publicly that they're available or not right now, that are on the market moving forward within the next month that can make this team better and get rid of some of these prospects that might be blocking positions for the bigger names that are coming up. And I think that's where David Stearns has to start. And I'll say it once more, I don't think it's going to happen all in one offseason. He didn't do it last offseason, which was already a late start as it is. You know, we've kind of seen it a little bit at the trade deadline. We really haven't seen it this offseason. I think he's got one more trade left in him. Hopefully it does involve prospects. But yeah, that's where I'm kind of like, there needs to be a method to the madness here. And I'm not faulting Cohen and Stearns sitting down and saying, we need to be more methodical about our spending habits. I'm not faulting them for that. But if you're going to do that, then make the trades necessary to show us that you are going to be a winning team, that you're making decisions on the prospects. That's it. And if that's not going to be the case, then don't get Marcus Semien. Then don't get Jorge Polanco. You know what I mean? They just don't even do that. Just let all these prospects play, and let's start this process early. So that's all I got for that.
That's why the actions speak louder than words. That's why it doesn't make sense getting Polanco and Semien if you're really not going to get Cody Bellinger or Framber Valdez or Amai, or getting a better proven talent on this team and have a bunch of question mark prospects, which is okay, but you're blocking other guys that could potentially be stars, that could be prospects that we just not going to see because they're going to probably have to play out of position, right? Jet Williams was supposed to be an excellent middle infielder, and now you're putting him in the outfield. How do we know that? You know, he has not been good since they've done that. You know, he's been losing a little bit of value, to be quite honest with you, since they moved him to the outfield. So that hurts not only in trade value, but the potential of him being a possibly really good player. Now that you moved him to the outfield, he might not be the same player. Like, that's the other thing too that's annoying. Like, we're trying to move all these guys out of position because you sign guys or trade for guys that are now blocking guys that potentially could have been all-star caliber prospects at a position that they played most of their career in the minors. And, you know, it's funny, Angela, and been a member for 9 months, and thank you for the super chat. Guys, what makes you think we are getting major free agents when small market Stearns only wants to sign players to 2 or 3 years? I mean, we've kind of been talking about that this whole time in regards to that. I agree with you. I don't think you can get great players on a 2 or 3 year deal. You get players that have been hurt the year before or haven't been good in a couple of years that take those short-term deals. That's the problem. That's a lot of hope and not, you know, proven talent or proven, you know, recent talent that they've been good. And I think that's the problem that we're falling into, Chris, is that, yeah, it's hard to put a competitive team, or that's a strong word, but a contending team getting a bunch of 2 or 3 year deals. Why do you think Devin Williams took a 3 year deal? If he was a great closer the last year, going in from his last good season 2 years ago, he might have got a longer term deal. Same thing goes for Luke Weaver. They took short-term deals because they sucked last year.
Yeah, but Luke Weaver was really good in 24, though. I mean, I know he didn't.
But that's a couple of years ago, though. But that's
Weaver didn't suck in 25. He just had a worse season than he did in 24. That's what it is. He posted respectable numbers overall.
Well, yeah, they're respectable numbers, but he did blow up in August and September for the Yankees.
He got thrust into a situation where he should have been because the other guy that's on the Mets right now kind of threw him under the bus.
But this is the problem. But that's the thing, though, right? That's what the teams see. They're not paying him for his April and May. They're giving him a 2 year deal because of the August and September disaster that he had. Same reason why Devin Williams got a 3 year deal and only $46 million, whatever it was. Like, because he was right behind Diaz as the best closer in baseball 2 years ago. No doubt about it. If he had a really good season last year, he would have probably got a longer term deal. But because he wasn't that good, and in the big market, he struggled and had his moments, but mostly struggled. That's why he got a shorter term deal. This is what it is with most of these players with 2 or 3 year deals.
Besides Polanco, and keep that comment up though, because I want to address that real quick.
Sorry about that.
But besides Polanco, because Polanco's coming off of a career year, and that's the
Yeah.
exception. He took a 2-year deal. I'm not even sure why Polanco took that kind of deal because
But he's a mid-30s guy. I don't think he was going to get more than that, to be honest with you.
yeah, maybe not. I mean, he could have maybe, I guess negotiated a 3rd year or whatever, but it is what it is. But I like the Polanco signing. I really do.
I do.
If it's the start to another bat coming into this lineup, but that's another conversation, right? But this is what it says from Angela, right? You just read it out loud, but this is what I just said before we propped up this comment. We don't always need to get the major free agents, right? We don't need to do it. If small market Stearns, according to a lot of Mets fans, goes out there and pulls off a trade like he did in his Milwaukee days to get a guy like Willy Adames, right, in the doors, whether it's from the offensive side or the pitching side, that's what I need to see. That's what we need to see. Make that type of trade. I don't care about these major free agents coming over or not, because there is something to be said for, look at this debacle of an organization. What is their president of baseball operations doing? They just came off of a year where they severely underachieved. Why would I go to that organization where I can go win elsewhere? There is, at the end of the day, whether we want to admit it or not, the money will always speak for itself, but some of these guys will choose other teams because of the situation, and I get it. But if you make a trade, a notable trade, unless they have a no trade clause and they veto it, these guys are coming to New York. That's it.
That's it.
And so that's what I'm saying is that I don't free agents or not, I don't care. Get the proven talent. I'll take a trade. I'll take 2 trades. I'll take 3 trades. You know what I mean? Of all these prospects going somewhere, if they're committed to winning, but only if you're committed to winning. Because if you're going to make 1 trade for another bat, right? And let's say not address the rotation or vice versa, then you might as well not make that trade.
Correct.
Don't make it. Do not, whatever you do, whatever decision you make, don't half-ass it. That's what all of us Mets fans, right, I think, are saying.
Correct. A big trade, a big signing makes the Simeon trade understandable. The Polanco signing, the Williams, the Weaver signing, it makes more sense. Because, again, why sign Williams as a closer if you got Dylan Ross, a potentially closer in the making, if you're going to rebuild? That's the thing.
This from Kev, you don't get it. Any trade is compensating for failing free agency. That's not true. It's not true. No. That's not true. We just explained it for 10 minutes on why that's not true and why there is a logjam of guys that can go to a small market like Mauricio, like Vientos, like Acuna, and go and thrive and get assets in return. It's not true. So like I said, people, this is what I'm saying with this Mets fan base. They need to spend $3 trillion on a team, and only then will people finally start to realize that getting free agents and the big name free agents isn't the only way to win, right? The Dodgers have done it, yes, but what led up to the Dodgers being able to do that? Because if you're going to sit here and tell both of us that Steve Cohen has not put over $1 billion to almost $2 billion in free agents signings that have resulted in not even a World Series appearance, just 1 NLCS appearance, then you haven't been watching this team for the past 4 years, 5 years, because he has been spending and it hasn't worked. So let's try something different. That's it.
Chris, I want to ask everybody in the comments and you, Chris, right? If the Mets would have made a start and pitching move the past 2 seasons, 2024, I'm talking about average, above average starting pitching at the deadline in 24. Get an ace. And I'm not saying, and for anybody who says, oh, nobody got traded that was an ace at the deadline. Yeah, because nobody was willing to go the extra mile. That's a problem if you're the New York Mets, right? You were trying to survive a season where you were really good in the beginning and choking down at the end. I'm going to ask you, would the Mets would have made the playoffs if they made a trade for above average or a top starter in 2025 and still bring up Nolan McLean in the middle of August? Do you believe they would have won 1 more game to make the playoffs?
Oh, yeah. I mean, yeah, for sure.
Then that move is worth it. Right? Remember when we talked about the Baez trade for PCA for Baez? Why that move would have made so much sense if Baez was the missing piece? It didn't make sense then because we knew there was too many holes for the New York Mets. We knew the only hole the Mets had last year, for the most part, was the starting pitching. If you would have got a top starter or even a top 2 starter in your rotation, you would have won maybe 1 or 2 more games that you were throwing out God knows who in August and September. Like, it's little things like that that can make a difference in a season or even in an offseason. If anybody believes Tarik Skubal is not going to take your team from a 75 team win to an 80 win team, you're nuts. He's a pitcher that will give you 5 more wins. You know why? Because in those 30 starts, when you're throwing David Peterson or Cody Senga, that you're continuing to lose and not doing the job, that guy is throwing gems and winning you ball games. That's a huge difference. And if you get Tarik Skubal, and let's say you don't make another big signing, but you bring in like a Donovan or somebody that's, solid players, instead of scoring 5.5 runs per game or 6 runs per game, you could still score the 5 runs per game that they scored last year and still win ball games. How many times last year did the Mets have to score 7 runs to even have a chance to win last year? And the Mets never had a stopper last year, which was the big reason why they fell apart from June on. That was the problem. So yes, one move could make a difference because that move could make everybody better. You don't think Skubal makes everybody else better in that rotation when Nolan McLean doesn't have to be the savior every day like he was last year when he came up? Now we can settle in to the number 2 spot in your rotation and be good. Doesn't have to be great. Be good. And guess what? When you have top 2 in your rotation that you're confident in, your 3, 4, 5 don't have to do more than what they're supposed to do. That is, be slightly above average or just average. That's a huge difference to a team.
Yeah, and I'll circle back to this one more time before we close things out, is that, like you just said, and we're talking about pitching because we've been talking about a lot of offense. We've been talking about why trades are necessary to make decisions on Vientos, Mauricio, etc. That's the same reason you need to make trades, to get rid of guys, to make room for a free agent or a trade, to bring in that caliber of a starting pitcher that you're talking about, whether it's Peralta, whether it's Skubal or somebody else, Joe Ryan, etc. Because you have David Peterson, right? You have Sean Manaea and you have Cody Senga clogging up spots in this rotation. Now, I don't think Sean Manaea is going to get moved, right? I don't think there's not going to be much interest in him, but we've been hearing about trade rumors surrounding David Peterson and Cody Senga. And if you're telling me that the Mets are going to go out there and prioritize bringing in a guy like Imai or bringing in a trade candidate like the names that we just mentioned, I say, I will pack David Peterson's and Cody Senga's bags for them and drive them to the airport with whichever team the Mets make that deal with, because it's about freeing up the blockage and the roster spots. That's what it's about, right? To get those guys in the doors. That's it.
Yeah.
You can't have a roster that's 27, 28, 29 guys on opening day. I'm sorry. You're limited to 26. So guys need to go if we're going to make this team better. That's it.
Exactly. Well said. And, this will be the last hot stove of the 2025 year. And next time we have a hot stove, it will be after the new year, definitely. And hopefully we're talking about, obviously Imai will be hopefully signed with a team, hopefully the New York Mets. And then we can have a better, broader picture of what the Mets are trying to do here overall and through the rest of the, again, guys, we're a month and a half away until pitchers and catchers. Like, there's not a lot of time. There's a lot of players available, but there isn't a lot of time for us to be talking about a roster construction when it will be constructed. And then we'll have talk about, holy shit, opening day is a month away when we get to that point. So we got to get ready. It's going to come up quick, guys. But if you don't tune in to my New Year's show tomorrow, that I'll bring in the new year with everybody on the stream. Happy New Year to you, Chris, to everybody in the chat. And make sure, be happy and healthy. Be careful, guys. We're always going to root for this goddamn team. I'm not sure why, but we still do. Chris, any final words before we go for the new year?
No, I think you summed it up to a T. I think that going back to the video that I posted, if you missed it, go check it out. It's in the description of my stream right now. We're going to get all the answers about how competitive the Mets are really going to be, or how David Stearns wants them to be in 2026 over this next month. So I really highly doubt any major news is going to break until after the new year. And I think that's when things will start ramping up across the league. And hopefully the Mets are shopping. And I'm not just saying shopping from the free agent market, but also the trade market in the upper echelon, because there needs to be multiple major moves to make this team better, not just one big move and then call it a day, because that's just not what we're faced with right now. So that's the hard part of what David Stearns has to figure out. But other than that, enjoy your New Year's. We'll be back with another show, another Mets Hot Stove Live with both of us in the new year. And until then, just just stay patient. That's all we can do right now. Times are tough with this Mets off season, and hopefully they get better. That's all I'll say.
That's it, guys. So have a great new year, guys. Be safe. Let's go Mets, and we'll see you next time in the new year on the Hot Stove, guys. Have a great night.
Let's go Mets.
Meet the Mets, meet the Mets. Step right up and greet the Mets. Bring your kiddies, bring your wife. Guaranteed to have the time of your life, because the Mets are really socking the ball.